encouragement to turn tragedies into your own triumphant life story? If so, this podcast is for you. Listen to powerful guests who have persevered through challenges so you can gain strength to build your championship life. The host of Professor of Perseverance podcast, Dr. James Purdue.
Hey, it's that time again. Hey, it's the second time today. For the ones that were blessed enough to share with the Brooke Ellison story, Brooke Ellison herself, Dr. Brooke Ellison earlier today, sharing her spinal cord injury and how she overcome her adversity. And now we're going to be blessed to come up with another tragic stuff here and how overcoming this. This is a taboo subject we're getting to today. A lot of people don't talk about this. We know it's out there. People want to shunt, hide, put their head in the sand and everything else. But today we're talking with Joshua Shea, a recovering pornography addict. All right, here we go. Taboo. The author of a book that just came out last year, Porn. Let me get it up here. Porn and the Pandemic. How 3 months in 2020 changed everything. Came out of July last year. So we'll be talking to him and we'll look at the covers of his other two books here in just a few minutes. So let's go and get started, get going here. Josh, welcome to the show, Bubba.
Thank you very much, Doc. I appreciate you inviting me on today.
Oh, you're welcome. And again, this is a subject that you know well that people would rather bury their head than talk about it, complain about it, than try to help find a solution. And I'm glad that you humble enough, grateful enough, swallow your pride or whatnot, that you're out there to help people hopefully get over this and move on in life.
Well, if I can help the people who are suffering with it, that's fantastic. But what I also want to do is the people who aren't suffering, who don't recognize it's a problem, really introduce the fact that this is exploding right now. It was exploding before the pandemic, and it's exploding even worse now. And we need to focus on this because, I'm not necessarily anti-pornography. What I am is anti-unhealthy sexuality. And too many people can't tell the difference between healthy and unhealthy sexuality. And they get to a place in their life where they don't know what to do, where they feel a sense of loss. They feel like they're lost in the woods and they don't know where to turn. And it's funny, you mentioned that, I'm here to talk about this. I have actually given more interviews about pornography addiction than anybody else in the world in the last 3-4 years. Who is second place? I think it's Terry Crews with about 10% of what I've done. Who's in third place? I got no idea because, again, this is something people don't want to talk about. And for whatever reason, something inside of me is just driving me to share this with the world. And it's important. And I hope that those who, we're not going to get graphic about this because there's no need to. We all know what pornography is. I hope those who maybe aren't suffering with this understand that they know somebody who is. People don't admit to this, but they know somebody, probably many somebodies who are dealing with this because the statistics are starting to be off the charts.
Oh, yeah. And not to say you ought to be ashamed of about it. Because it's natural what we do, sexuality. But when you, like I said, when you get the unrealistic of what's real and not realizing at the show, it's a pornography, it's whatever, and it's not healthy in the other real life like that, depending. And again, people shouldn't be ashamed if they were, or if they are, or hopefully not addicted anymore, because I'm a believer we're all addicted to something. I love a good banana split and pizza. And so, but that's totally different. But there's things we can do in a healthy way and thing. Yeah, from there.
Well, that's it. And one of my messages to the people who are suffering is that, I also was an alcoholic. I had a boatload of trauma, like a lot of people who are porn addicts. And if I can get better, anybody can get better. And that's that's a lot of my message out there to the people who are suffering is you can indeed get better. And you shouldn't feel shame over this because it's an addiction. It's the chemicals of your brain telling you to do certain things. Why did you get addicted to porn versus cigarettes or food or gambling or something else? That's for you and your shrink to figure out, or you and your coach to figure out. But there's a big difference between an addict and a recreational user when it comes to this kind of stuff. Just like there's a huge difference between me, who goes to my local casino once or twice a year, and the guy who's there every night. Like you said, we all have our different things, but it's important when we look in the mirror to know what we're dealing with, to be honest what we're dealing with, and hopefully to get help with what we're dealing with. Because I can tell you the first 37 years of my life, most of which were ravaged with alcohol and porn addiction, are so much better now. I feel younger at 45 than I ever did at 30. It's amazing what's on the other side of addiction. And I hope that people listening who may have some proclivities towards that truly do internalize this, even if it's not pornography, if it is food, if it is alcohol, whatever it is you may find yourself obsessed with, or a compulsive user of, or a full-on addict to, you can turn it around and you can get better.
That's it. And the quicker we can face the adversity, whatever it is, accept it, and the quicker we can start healing. So now I remember I was probably about 13 when I first saw my first, probably not my first Playboy. All right. Probably I was younger than 13 on that. But remembering the first Penthouse and seeing the difference in art, they call it art back then. But there was a 16, 17-year-old boy down the road where I lived and introduced me to the first Penthouse compared to a Playboy. And so that's when I would realize, boy, how wild things could really get. And of course, at a 13-year-old, your mind is really going.
Oh, it's the difference between a G-rated movie and an R-rated movie. It's just, wow.
Yeah. And so, fortunately, I didn't become addicted. I like to think, hopefully, that I came up naturally. Well, probably not naturally introduced to that, but more normal than someone that does get addicted. Because I don't like to watch it on TV. Really, I'm one of them says if I'm going to be involved, I want to be involved, not watch. If I'm playing a baseball game, I don't sit the bench and watch it. I want to play the game.
Oh,
and so
I feel that way about watching poker on TV.
Yes. I would love to be in one of them. I'd lose everything, but I'd love to be there. So
yeah, me too, unfortunately.
Yeah. So how old were you when you first, and do you think that young or however you were led you to that, or did it just take time?
Most people who are porn addicts, and I'm going to say this is true with males. I have not seen a study on females, and I'd want to make it well aware that females, especially today, especially the younger ones, do suffer from pornography addiction. Women under 30 who don't know a world before the internet, they are addicted to pornography at only slightly smaller levels than the men who have been introduced. And if you look overall at demographics, white women are one of the fastest growing segments of the pornography addiction community. That's my cat.
There he is.
Yeah, he enjoys the camera even more. The camera even more than I do.
There you go.
But anyway, so I do want to stress that it is not a male thing. It is anybody who, has any sexual organs. And as it turns out, that's all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're man, woman, white, black, Mexican, Asian, smart, stupid, poor, rich. Anybody can be a porn addict. So that's one of the things that, I do try to stress immediately, is that it's not a 17-year-old kid who's never kissed a girl in real life, and it's not the 72-year-old guy flashing people at the park. Anybody can be a porn addict. And when you look at these younger people, it's the internet that got them. Now, when you look at people who are your age, my age, there was a study done by kind of the guy who's the godfather in this industry, Dr. Patrick Carnes. And he discovered that among men who have sex addiction, porn addiction, this family of addictions, that around 70% suffered some kind of physical abuse when they were young, and that generated trauma. Around 80% had some kind of sexual abuse happen, and that generated trauma. And more than 90% had some kind of emotional or mental abuse, and that too generated trauma. So when you're talking about men who end up as pornography addicts, you are talking about almost 90% have some kind of unresolved trauma. And people who have unresolved trauma tend to move towards addiction, whether it's porn or heroin or whatever it is, because of the sexual abuse aspect, because of the emotional abuse aspect of this. You find people, especially the men, move towards pornography, move towards a life of promiscuity, move towards a life of exhibitionism, move towards a life of being, a peeping Tom. These are all under the umbrella of sexual addiction, and it just happens to depend on what exactly happened to you or whatnot, how you end up where you are. Obviously, the people who are promiscuous, the people who are porn, far outnumber those who are exhibitionists or peeping Toms, but it's all the same addiction, basically. And for myself, I, at the hands of a babysitter when I was young, did experience both sexual abuse and mental and emotional abuse. And I believe that this was between the ages of probably 3 and 6, 3 and 7, I believe when I was about 11, 12 years old, and my older cousin showed me a Penthouse or a Hustler, I don't even remember what it was, showed it to me for the first time, I was almost instantaneously addicted to it. This did not affect me like it probably affected you or affects most guys or girls who look at pornography the first time. I was addicted like that. And I'll tell you, the only other time I ever felt this way in my life was about 2 years later when I was 13 or 14. I was at a wedding and I got really drunk for the first time. And all of a sudden, it was the same thing with the pornography. I felt like a warm feeling come over me. I felt in control of my life. I felt like stress, anxiety, all those little things I couldn't tell anybody, they were all gone. I just felt great. And at 13, 14 years old, I internalized that we are in a bad world full of bad people who do bad things. But if I want to feel better, I have pornography, I have alcohol, and this is what is going to get me through the rest of my life. And the reason I was that way, the reason that I reached those conclusions immediately was because I never fully developed my coping skills. I never fully developed my survival skills. When I was that kid at that babysitter's house, I developed what I needed to develop to get to the next day. And unfortunately, the coping skills of a 7-year-old boy are not what a 17-year-old boy or a 27-year-old man or a 37-year-old man need to get through life. And that's where we find a lot of our men and now a lot of our women in society is they don't have the coping skills they need. So they move towards addiction, whatever kind it is, they move towards addiction. People need to recognize addiction is not the main problem. Addiction is a response to the main problem. My main problem, and it's almost always, like I said, almost some kind of unresolved trauma. A lot of it was betrayal trauma in my case. And that is what the addictions dealt with. The addictions softened that part of my mind where that was still living. And I had to go and I had to deal with that trauma before I could deal with my addictions. Dealing with your addictions is great, but if you don't deal with the root problem, that's like putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. You can hide the wound, you can tend to the wound, but the wound is still there. And until you deal with that wound that caused the need for the Band-Aid, you're not going to really get at the main problem.
And I'm sitting there just listening, because I didn't, again, I don't consider myself was ever addicted to porn. I'd say I've never looked at it. Of course, I'm 57. I don't care about looking at any of it anymore. But as a young teenage stuff, I can't say I never looked
It's normal.
at it.
It's normal and it's natural. Nobody should feel like a pervert because they're interested in sexuality. That's actually healthy. We're all here because our birth mother and our birth father got it on one day. And
right.
Sexuality is not a bad thing. When I went into rehab, one of the first things they tell us, they put us with the eating disorder people, and they put the alcohol and the drug people in another room. When they bring you first in and they say, when it's alcohol and drugs, the goal is abstinence. You have to stop. When it comes to sexuality, when it comes to food, you have to develop a healthy relationship. I can't turn off sexuality because I then become what's called a sexual anorexic. And that's just as unhealthy as being too into sex and having it interfere with your life that way. There has to be a healthy medium. So anybody out there who looks at porn, and with men under 50, it's 80% look at least once a month. With women under 50, 60% look once a month. So if you look at porn, you are actually more normal than the people who don't look at porn, according to statistics. So I don't want anybody who looks at porn to, number one, self-diagnose themselves with a problem right away, or number two, feel like they're outside the norm or outside of some kind of, normalness, and they're a secret pervert, because everybody looks at this. It is absolutely normal. It's just that, like so many other things in life, we have to learn about it. We have to educate ourselves about it. We have to educate our kids about it. And then maybe we can get to a point in society where, we have lower numbers of addiction because we're not burying our heads in the sand, like you said so well at the beginning of this.
And I'm glad you brought this up about going to your rehab and everything about this. I never thought about. I mean, I would have thought, hey, stop watching that, quit. Like the alcoholic or drugs. I would have gone, but no, like I said, if you starve yourself from it, it's not healthy either. And so I can unsee that where they would be with the. I don't want to say overeaters, but people would
most of them were actually undereaters, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, the anorexics and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so with the food problems or addicts, not addicts.
Yep, they're still addicts, even though they don't eat enough. They're addicted to.
I'm glad you explained it that way, because I would have never thought that. I would have thought, take that internet out of here and you're done. Forget that and don't touch yourself. But no, it makes more sense the way you explain that, because again, it is natural for
absolutely.
that. Yeah,
absolutely. And
I'm glad you explained that.
And again, it's natural to like the feeling of adrenaline hitting you. But there have been studies done on people who are like extreme skiers and who climb, mountains with nothing but their hands. These people actually have chemical imbalances similar to addicts who need to hit that dopamine, need to hit that serotonin. When you have a banana split, I bet it's not always because you're hungry. I bet it's because your mind is telling you you need one to be happy. You need that right now to satisfy some urge that isn't actually hunger. And that's the same thing with pornography. I'm not satisfying any kind of sexual urge. I had a wonderful wife and we had a fairly healthy life in that area. But unfortunately, there were the other aspects at play, and I had to learn about those because it's really two different worlds.
I can see people that were physically, sexually abused at a young 10, 7, 14 I can see that, and from there that they get overwhelmed and just not understand exactly what's going on. But and emotionally, I can see that as well. I didn't think I guess I was lumping mental and emotional together. Yeah, I guess
Well, and it can be a lot of time. It's connected. And, the key is, when were you sexualized? Now, imagine this. Imagine that you are a 9-year-old boy and you are exposed to pornography for the first time. You learn about breasts, for instance, and you find yourselves inexplicably attracted to them. You can't explain it. It's all in our DNA as males, hardwired. And you go to school the next day, and suddenly that teacher who you loved, that teacher who you saw as a mother figure, as a nurturer, as a friend, Mrs. Smith, let's call her. Well, suddenly Mrs. Smith isn't just that person. She's a person who has breasts. That means that you've been sexualized as a child. And there is so much data out there that shows the older you are, hopefully not until you hit puberty, but the older you are when you are sexualized, the more healthy sexually you will be. But unfortunately, we give every kid in the world that's 10 years old now the best porn computer that's ever been invented, and we don't teach them how to use it properly. To me, that's the biggest problem in all of it.
I was going to bring that up. How statistically, and there's got to be already some information about how the internet, the phones that pick up the internet, and how these younger kids are getting addicted so early.
Well, it's one of these things that it's repetition for a lot of them. It's dealing with something else. It's the curiosity factor. And I think that, most people who become addicts, they will tell you in the beginning, it's great. It's fantastic. Obviously the alcohol made me feel great for years and years, made me feel like a better version of myself. I felt like my pornography addiction, I learned as I became healthy, was really about control. Because when you think about it, nobody on that page of that magazine, nobody on that screen can ever say no to you. And you are in control of the world. And if you don't like what you're looking at, you hit the button and you move on to the next person or the next scene or whatever it is you want. Because with a lot of people, pornography is about control. I gave up my control at that babysitter's house. I gave up my control in a sexual way at that babysitter's house. And I think that somewhere along the way, I learned that pornography was a way of claiming my sexual control back, even though it's a very unhealthy way to do that. But I didn't know at the time. It felt good. It felt safe. It made me feel better. It wasn't until later on that, when my life started falling apart in my mid-30s, that I and got into recovery, that I learned what a giant role pornography played and why I used it and why my brain told me that I needed it. It's unfortunate, but it was almost better that we had hurdles when we were younger. We had to stumble upon a magazine. We had our channels on TV were scrambled back then, so you couldn't get those adult channels. And again, with telephones, with iPads, with all of these things we have out there, as I always tell parents, you can put all of the filters on your kid's phone that you want. What happens when they're standing at the bus stop and little Johnny holds up whatever the latest trash from Pornhub or whatever is? How is your kid going to respond? What is your kid going to say? What is your kid going to do? If you don't know that answer because you've buried your head in the sand with filters, you're not porn-proofing your kid, because you can't porn-proof your kid. It's not a matter of if they're going to see it. It's a matter of when, and the earlier that you can start that conversation in a very age-appropriate way, the better off you'll be. For instance, you can say to a 5-year-old, you don't ever let anybody take pictures of you when you were naked or you were in your underwear. And you don't ever take pictures of other people when they are naked or in their underwear, and leave it at that. Kids want to learn. Kids don't know what pornography is. Kids haven't assigned embarrassment and shame to it yet. So a simple lesson like that. And those lessons can come as they get older. And, I believe 13 and 14-year-old boys, they don't want to be porn addicts. They want to mostly, assuming they're heterosexual, they want to have a girlfriend. They want to have sex with that girlfriend, but they will take what they can get in the meantime, which usually is masturbation to pornography. But they need to be taught that, there are guys, and I do some coaching with porn addicts. I worked with a guy 2 years ago who had what's known as porn-induced erectile dysfunction, PIED. And it's one of the most fascinating conditions out there, and it's exploding amongst guys in their late teens, early 20s, where they cannot function normal sexually unless they have pornography. And this guy had a wonderful girlfriend. I worked with both of them. He was 22, she was 20. They would have to bring a laptop computer to their bedroom that showed pornography for him to finish naturally. And eventually she figured out that if she was in the living room, he was in the bedroom, they could communicate through their laptops, do like a video chat. And because it was on a screen, his mind told him it was pornography. So right when they were about to finish, she would run in the room and they would finish like quote unquote normal people. And they I worked with them. I referred them to some other people. They're thankfully in a much healthier place now. Not 100%, but that guy, obviously I'm not going to name him, but that guy, he essentially fried his dopamine receptors, serotonin. There were 6 different chemicals up there that you're catering to. He essentially fried those before he turned 20 years old. And if he didn't take care of that stuff, you tell me, how many women want to be with a guy like that? How many women, want to have a life where, think about this, think about how twisted this is. If you want to have a child, pornography has to be playing in the room when you try. That's the world we live in now, but that's the world behind the scenes that people don't know about until they get there. And that's that's all I'm trying to do here. That's why I come on shows like yours. And I thank you so much for, having the bravery to let me on, because not everybody has that. We need to pull back the curtain, and we don't have to discuss pornography per se to discuss the ramifications and to discuss pornography addiction. And as a society, especially after this pandemic, we need to start having these conversations no matter how uncomfortable they are.
I can see with the pandemic and people staying at home, I can see that
greatest thing for the industry. Greatest thing for the industry. Yes, I can see
that exploding. Yes, I can see that. Just like other things exploding, they're talking about, domestic violence, more kids going hungry, more kids being depressed and suicidal because of this pandemic. I can see them turning towards the internet then, because there's no one's there to watch them now.
Right.
They're not at school for 7 hours to keep them watch debate. I can see that happening. So, hey, I want to tell you that, Josh, I'm a little older than you. You're talking about the scrambling TV channels and everything. I'll tell you, I remember when all I could pick up is channel 2, 4, and 5. That was it. So that's it. No cable back then. You had the antenna, and all you had then was 2, 4, and 5, black and white. So that's so we didn't have all that problem, but again, we did have the magazines floating around in the neighborhood. Yep. So to keep our interest from there. All right, now Josh, I thought it was fascinating. I can see this too, that more women today with the internet, the number has raised, and being the I wouldn't necessarily say the white women exploding, but just women per se, interest because of the internet.
The 4 groups that are exploding right now are white women, black men, and members of both the Catholic and the LDS churches. And I think that at least among the black men and the white women, I think this is because pornography is now simple to make, simple to produce, simple to distribute. Back when you and I were younger, I mean, in the as recently as the mid 90s, before the internet hit, there were still a lot of adult theaters, and those were filled with white men because the pornography industry knew that it was a market. They were sure that that was a market. So they catered to that market because it cost a lot hiring actors, making the movie, distributing the movie, collecting your receipts, sharing them with it was just a major deal. Now you and I, with an iPhone and Craigslist, can have a movie produced and up on the internet, making us money by the end of the day. So now, since it costs so little to make, you see all these different genres that are, appealing to different demographics of people. And now, you can produce one of the biggest growing areas of pornography is lesbian pornography, which essentially didn't exist. I mean, and this is not just, the male fantasy two-girl thing. Mm-hmm. This is designed for lesbian women, which is a very different story and product than designed for the straight guy. And in the past, lesbians wouldn't go to a theater like that. Lesbians wouldn't go into an adult bookstore to look for videos. But because you and I can do this, and the lesbians can do this in the privacy of their own home, well, you know what? Just like everybody else, just like the white women, the black men, the white men, everybody on earth, the religious people even, we all have this natural sexuality within us, this natural curiosity. And now it's cheaper to produce. So you've got people making it for these targeted audiences where they can make money now that they couldn't in the past. And I think that's why you're seeing you look at the straight white male, the number of the percentage, I should say, of pornography addicts is not growing compared to these other demographics. And I believe it is because these other demographics are finally being catered to for the first time.
And we're talking with Joshua Shea, co-author of this book here, which is called co-author. He's a porn addict. Now what? An expert and former addict answers your questions. Also, along with another book he came out a little while ago, which is The Addiction Nobody Would Talk About. How I Let My Pornography Addiction Hurt People and Destroy Relationships. Now, that's a topic right there. How many people do you think are you said 90s, before internet exploded and everything? So would you say 90? Pre-90 and after 90 with the internet, what percentage do you think went up or down that would be considered closet pornography addicts, that they hid it from everybody as much as possible? Do you think that number would raised or gone down, be about the same?
What we see is that it's really done in terms of, like you said, pre-internet and post-internet. Pre-internet, the number for males, which is really all we have, the number for males, and most of this is self-diagnosed, we got to keep in mind, was, depending on what study you read, between 12 and 18% of the adult male population. That's 80 or 18 to 80. So 12 to 18%. Now, one of the, to me, most damning studies that's come out, and this was, again, a couple of years before the pandemic started, in 2018, there's an organization called the Barna Group that was commissioned to do a study. They interviewed thousands of men. In this 18 to 30-year-old group, these are the guys who don't remember a world before the internet. Roughly 32%, between 32 and 33%, said that they either watch too much pornography, believe they're developing a problem with pornography, or have a full-blown pornography addiction. Again, this is self, diagnosing, but when 1 out of 3 men under 30, which is basically double the number of men prior to the internet, say that they have an issue with pornography, you want to talk about pandemic, you want to talk about epidemic, we need to take care of this, because these men who are 30 will be 40, will be 50, we'll be 60. They're going to be joined by women getting older at that point. What happens when a third of our population is addicted to pornography? You can't tell me that that is a healthy sexual society. You saw what a society looks like when, let's say, 15% of the men are addicted to pornography. You saw what happens in our media. You saw what happens in Hollywood. You saw what happened, at the newsstand. Well, what happens when we have double that number out there? Are we even going to be able to have this conversation then? It's going to make statistics with things like drugs and alcohol, which are huge problems. Again, I had my own alcohol issues, but it's going to make those percentages look minuscule in comparison if we don't start addressing this.
Let me ask this question here, Josh. My younger brother, was an alcoholic. He died from his alcohol abuse.
I'm sorry.
2 weeks before his 38th birthday.
Oh.
And I don't know if he wasn't a closet drinker. We all knew it. Okay. We tried to talk to him. We got him to the hospital one time because he was jaundiced. His liver wasn't working correctly. And they told him if he continued drinking, they'd give him a 10% chance to live 5 years. And I think he made it 2 years. So why? I guess why. Maybe I want to know this because he would never tell us anything. If you know that this addiction, whether it's porn, alcohol, drugs, eating a banana split, if you know it's unhealthy and hurting you, how come we don't realize that it's hurting our loved ones and other people in the relationships? Are we just in denial, or
you know what? I think we
don't think it affects them? It's just me.
No, I believe, at least this is me having talked to now hundreds of addicts of all shapes and sizes and varieties. I truly believe that we understand the hurt we're causing other people. We understand the physical and mental hurt we're causing ourselves. But the pull of these chemicals over us are just too strong. I was going through this with a wonderful wife, best woman in the world, 2 great kids. I had a great job. I was on my local city council, as a local politician. People knew who I was. I was, financially well off. It's one of these things where it doesn't matter what happens. It's like anybody can be an alcoholic. Anybody can be a drug addict. Anybody can be a porn addict or any other kind of addict. And it's important to recognize that it isn't about having free choice by the time you're an addict. I have people do this experiment, especially younger people. Before the pandemic, when I would speak at libraries or speak at churches or colleges, I always urged people to try this one morning. Take your cell phone and turn up all of the notifications. Turn on every push notification, every chime, every beep, every ding. Turn it up all the way. And then take a Post-it note and essentially put it across the face of your phone. Then put that phone next to you. If you're like just about anybody in society, within 10, 15 minutes, there's going to be a ding. But you can't look at it because you have that Post-it note on there. And within another 10, 15 minutes, maybe there's another ding. Somebody liked a photo you put up on Facebook, or maybe somebody's texting you, but you can't look at it. You cannot look at your phone because you are addicted to your phone. We as a society are addicted to our phones. Now, it's only a tiny portion compared to a chemical or a process addiction that people need to seek help for. But I guarantee you, and I've talked to a lot of people who've done this, they last either 2 hours or about 6 or 7 notifications, and then they have to grab that phone and rip it off. Because when you get that little chime, when you get that little ding, that is like a tiny little hit of dopamine in your head. Somebody needs something. Somebody's paying attention to me. Somebody is commenting on something that I did. We are, as people, we now can get the attention that we've always wanted, always craved. Andy Warhol says everybody will be famous for 15 minutes. And now we control that 1 second at a time through our phones. And when you shut people off from their phones, they will experience just a tiny portion of what addiction feels like. And I guarantee you, when that 6th or 7th ding comes through and you have to grab your phone and rip it off, It doesn't matter what your mom thinks. It doesn't matter what your boss thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. You need to see what's on that phone screen, and you will do what it takes to see what's on that phone screen. Look at how many people take smoke breaks. You see just as many people with their phones out there now. People are addicted to their phones. And if you run this experiment, I think that you will better understand what addiction feels like. All of those things that should matter, all of those things that do matter, don't matter as much as this storm in your head that is screaming, do this, do this, do this, or you're going to die. Addiction is a lot like thirst. You can only put it off so long, and then you fully believe you're going to die. So you have to dive in there. You have to get that drink of water. You have to, see that pornography. You have to eat that banana split, get that drink, shoot the heroin, whatever it is. Your mind, your diseased mind, because addiction is a disease. People need to recognize this. It's a disease of our own making, but it's nonetheless still technically a disease. It is something that, the average mind can't deal with, even when it understands that there are all of these repercussions and all of these effects of the negative behavior. And that's one of the top definitions of addiction, is when you can't stop despite understanding that there are negative consequences.
And I agree with you 100% that the cell phones may be the biggest addiction around nowadays, because not everybody's a smoker, not everybody's a drinker, not everybody's pornography, not everybody's a banana split connoisseur like me. All right. But everybody, it seems, not everybody, but the majority has that phone to go after. So yeah, we're addicted to something, and that's for sure. We all are, and we just need to find out if it's a healthy one. If it's not, we need to find a way to get some help before we get overboard with it. So
Absolutely.
The thing with my brother is I told when he passed, I told my mom, I said, well, at least he doesn't have to face that demon any longer. So
no, and the self-loathing and the pain that he felt from knowing he was hurting all of you, it does not match the pain that you guys felt. And that's what you have to recognize. And that's why, especially with something like pornography, you cannot shame the addict. You cannot embarrass the addict. You cannot judge the addict. Anybody who does that, the addict is not going to keep talking to you. And like I said, I coach a lot of people. I also coach a lot of wives. My second book was designed for the wives, because they are left standing there. If your loved one is using heroin, your husband, your wife is using heroin, you don't ask yourself if it's because you're not enough. But if your husband or wife is looking at pornography, is not, you notice they're not having as much sex with you, is that because you're not enough? You aren't good enough in bed. You aren't sexy enough. You aren't meeting their needs. Sex addiction, pornography addiction is one of the only addictions where I think it hits the partner just as bad, if not worse, than the addict, because that partner then hits a wall of betrayal trauma that is crazy, and that is it crushes some of them. It leaves them crushed for years. And I've now begun working with them, and it's an amazing journey working with both sides of this, because it shows you just how much this addiction rips people apart. And the natural feeling for a lot of the partners is to judge, is to shame, is to say, well, what's wrong with me? And what's wrong with you that I'm not enough? Well, you know what? It has nothing to do with you. I was a porn addict at 12, 13 years old. I met my wife when I was 26. That's 13 years of my life that I was an addict before meeting her. It hurt her feelings. It crushed her. Thankfully, she works in healthcare, so she understood addiction a little bit more and understood it wasn't about her. But it takes some people a very long time to recognize it's not about them at all. It's about the addict. It's about the addict coping with something else. And it's hard to really wrap your arms around that when you have been so hurt by an addict.
I could see the partner, spouse, really, what have I not done for you to go that route.
Right.
You know,
And
I can see a lot of guilt
yeah,
being
yeah.
thrown around in that area. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tragic because it's not their fault. Their feelings are 100% legitimate, but it's not their fault. And trying to find that place where you can find a healthy ground and hopefully support the addict's recovery and be their number one cheerleader. My wife was my number one cheerleader. That's why I made it this far. That's what I needed. Unfortunately, in well more than half the situations, the partner leaves. That's part of why I wrote that book with my friend Tony, who's a licensed medical and family therapist, is because we wanted to try. We don't say in the book you have to stay. We don't say in the book you have to leave. What we urge people to do who have been hit by a partner with porn or sex addiction is to take a step back, take a deep breath, try to gather yourself, and look at the situation for what it truly is, not through your eyes, not through his eyes, but through the reality, through the science, through where you truly are, and make your decisions that way, if possible.
And again, we're talking with Joshua Shea, latest book coming out just last year, Porn and the Pandemic, How 3 Months in 2020 Changed Everything. So, yeah, I believe this pandemic has hurt us more than what people are going to realize or want to realize. In the long run, I believe they'll figure it out. So, all right, Josh,
Absolutely.
is there, I appreciate you being here and sharing this topic. Yeah, it's out there. It's real. The best we can do is just try to educate people and hope that they do something to make a difference and go from there. And so hopefully a spouse or a loved one, somebody is going to see or hear this podcast, and then they can share it with someone they may need help from there. So I appreciate you coming on. And so go ahead and tell everybody how they can get hold of you if someone wants to reach out to you as a coach or something about your books.
Yeah, absolutely. The books are all, they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any place like that. You can just go search my name and that'll bring you right up. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Twitter and Instagram. I push the Instagram more because I'm there every day. It is the letter P, Addict Recovery. And then my website is also paddictrecovery.com. You can learn about pornography addiction. You can read articles both about addiction and recovery that I've written. There are other resources for you. If you want to go the 12-step route, if you want to go rehab, if you want to go therapist, I talk about all of it. And then you can also inquire about my coaching. I do give a 30-minute free introductory just to see if we click, to find out what your issue is. It's and I'll tell you real quick, what's interesting is that there are a lot of women who want their husbands to meet with me. And what it turns out is that not that their husband is a porn addict, it's that the wives have said, I don't want you watching porn. They watch it anyway. They're not addicted. They just are bad husbands who don't respect boundaries. I have to actually tell a lot of women that, which is surprisingly, I didn't think I would, but that's the toughest part of what I do. If you're a porn addict, if you are dealing with betrayal trauma from a porn addict or a sex addict, or you've got betrayal trauma from, other things, I am certified and trained in this area. Visit the Addict Recovery. Drop me a line, addictrecovery@gmail.com. I'm not hard to find out there, and I'm more than willing to help you out.
And I'll put all that in the description and show notes as well.
Thank you.
And everything. You're welcome. So, and thank you for being here again and educating us some. I've been educated a lot through this series. And so that's one reason I do this, is not to, to help out as many people as can push things out, but, for me to learn, to continue learning.
Yeah.
I'm not that old that I can't learn something, the old dog grabbing a new bone out there. So, all right.
Well, if you ever reach that point, it's time to shut down the podcast, move up to the mountains, and leave the rest of us alone who want to keep learning.
There you go. That's right. So I tell everybody, y'all learnt me something today. Done learnt me something. So, well, I appreciate it, Josh. Hey, now we know that people are struggling today, and I don't care in what area, but if you can leave us with a positive message to help someone get through today, that would be great.
Don't rely on others to make your life better. you have all the power in the world. You have so much inside of you that you can't listen to the naysayers. You can't listen to the people who say it's not possible. If I can radically change my life, and I know so many people who have radically changed their lives, even if they aren't addicts, but they make the decision to turn things around. You can do it, and the power is all yours. It's not going to be me. I can help you as a coach. It's not going to be your therapist or your doctor or your wife or your kids. You have to live this life and your best possible life for yourself, because you're the only one who can control it. And that's not a bad thing. That's the most powerful thing on earth.
And it goes back to, if somebody doesn't want help, you can't do it.
Absolutely.
The old thing, lead them to the water, but you can't make them funnel it. So
absolutely.
All right, Josh, thank you, buddy, for coming in, and we'll go from there. And everyone else, be sure to like, share to someone that needs some hope, some help to help get through, again, pornography addiction or whatever addiction. Just substitute pornography for something, and the message is still going to help. So we all know somebody's struggling, and going from there. Hey, I'm Dr. James Purdue, the professor of perseverance. Thank y'all for being here. Do something today, tomorrow, something next week that's going to help you persevere past your paralysis.
Thanks for listening to the Professor of Perseverance podcast for motivation, inspiration, and encouragement. For more information, go to Facebook at Professor of Perseverance. Visit the website at professorofperseverance.com and view the YouTube channel, Dr. James Purdue, Professor of Perseverance.